Welcome to You Are Not a Frog, the podcast for GPs, doctors and other professionals in high-stress jobs. Working in today's pressured environment, you may feel like a frog in boiling water. Things have heated up so slowly that you might not have noticed the extra long days becoming the norm. You've got used to feeling constantly busy and often one crisis away from not coping. Let's face it, frogs only have two options: to stay in the pan, be boiled alive, or to hop out and leave. But you are not a frog, and that's where this podcast comes in. You can do more than just hop out or burn out. There are simple changes that you can make which will make a huge difference to your stress levels and help you enjoy life again. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Morris, GP turned executive coach, speaker, specialist in workplace resilience and creator of the Shapes Toolkit training programme. In the podcast, I'll be chatting with friends, colleagues and experts, all who have an interesting take on this stuff, so that together we can take back control and thrive. If you want more resources, including CPD reflection forms for the podcast, then make sure you've signed up to the You Are Not a Frog Collective, and please share these podcasts with anyone who needs them. On with the episode. It's really great to have with me on the podcast today Sheela Hobden. Now, Sheela is a professional certified coach and she specialises in wellbeing, and the key part of her job is really helping doctors take their own wellbeing as seriously as their patients' wellbeing. I think that's a brilliant strapline, Sheela. Have you found that doctors do that or not?
Yes, so they're learning too, and I think it's much easier to look at well-being if you think you're looking after someone else than it is to help yourself. So we're quite good at dishing out the advice, but sometimes we forget to follow it ourselves. So it's about helping people to find ways to do it for themselves as well.
Yeah, for sure. And how did you get into helping sort of doctors and professionals?
So I'll try and cut the story as short as I can. Essentially, I was working in the corporate world. I was working for Kraft Foods when Kraft Foods bought out Cadbury, and essentially through a series of events, ended up burning myself out, and that resulted in a bit of time out of the workplace. And when I got myself fixed back up and running, I realised it wasn't really what I wanted to do anymore. Quit my job one day, no plan B, got a coach and found it such a transformational process that I thought, I want to help people not get into the situation that I got into. And I thought coaching was a great way to do that. So then I set about learning about wellbeing and resilience, and got some qualifications in that area as well as I'm a practitioner using the RAW tool. And through a series of connections, started doing some work with Wessex LMC and started delivering their training for them for wellbeing and resilience for doctors. And that meant that people were coming to me on a one-to-one on the back of those sessions. And I found that it's a group of people that I'm really passionate about working with because they're so passionate about helping other people. And it felt like someone needed to press a pause button for them and say, well, hold on a minute, what about you? And so really sort of thriving in that work. And it's just great seeing people find ways to look after themselves so that they can really enjoy the work that they dreamt about doing as all those years of study went by. So I think hopefully that's a short summary.
I think it is interesting with doctors and other professionals who are in high stress jobs. They sort of understand the theory and they sort of think that it definitely applies to other people, but not particularly them, because they are maybe got extra resilience or they've got extra capacity and they can keep going and going and going. And it's interesting. I think it's a very historical thing, the way that we do our training, the way we, I remember working 120 hours a week, and, lawyers, it's, how many hours they spend at work and pushing through the night and just got to get that deal. So it's quite a fixed mindset that actually we can be superhuman and nothing really affects us. But as we know, that's a complete fallacy. Yeah. And absolutely. And how can you look after your patients well if you are on the edge of burnout yourself?
Yeah, and there's always that thing of, I'll stop when. I'll stop when I've done this or I've done that. And I had that as well with, when I get this qualification, it'll be okay. When I get that certification, it'll be okay. When I win that client, it'll be okay. And and then equally, I'll take a break when this happens or when that happens, and it just, that point never arrives. You never feel satisfied that you've got to where you want to be. And also in terms of when people are feeling like, oh, I might need some sort of break, the philosophy is, well, I won't do it until I'm completely on my knees. But actually that's too late. And so then there's something a step before that, in recognizing, actually, if I take some time out now, I'll take less time out than if I wait till I really, really am crippled by all of this. Because we know that the earlier people take time out, the less time they will take. And I think I was on the cusp myself, because I had about 6 weeks out, and apparently that's the kind of cut-off point between, if you get back into work after the sort of 6 weeks, you're more likely to survive and thrive. And when it's longer periods than that, it's so much harder to get back in on the other side.
Right. I think it's really interesting, this thing about taking time out and I will rest when. And I know that we've got lots of trainees that listen to this podcast, and maybe some of them are thinking, I will rest when I've done my exams. I will rest when I finish this rotation. Or lawyers, I know, I will rest when I've done this deal and I've just got another one. That the problem is, you get to the end of one thing and the next thing is there already. You don't, I guess I'm guilty of that myself. I will rest once I've prepared this course or that course or done that. But the next one is already on the horizon. So unless we start to build in regular times where we can rest, even within the busyness and even within the stress of our lives, it's going to be really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've got, we've spoken before about this. I've got an analogy that I built up. So I run a little program called the MOT for you, and it's all built around the parts of a car and how they represent what we need to do. So if we look after ourselves as much as we looked after our cars, we'd actually be okay. And the item of the car for the rest is, if we imagine that the car is an electric car and it's got an electric charging cable. You charge the car up and it will run, I think, for about 8 hours. And then it needs to be recharged, because it physically won't move anywhere. So if you imagine that you are an electric car and thinking about when you need to top yourself up, and it doesn't have to be anything big. So it can be 1 minute, 5 minutes of something each hour to give yourself a recharge. There's a little philosophy around the 5 M's. So movement, mindfulness or meditation, mastery, so learning something new, then what else have I missed? Movement, mindful, meditation, mastery, and the other one is mwahaha, which is something funny. So look at something funny on YouTube, Twitter, just have a little bit of a laugh, because it just sends some positive vibes through the body, get some dopamine into the brain, and actually once we're in that funny place, funny ha-ha place, we start to see things more positively and we're more creative, we learn better. So actually, if we've started out talking about trainees, if you can take a minute out to do something funny, you're probably going to take more knowledge in when you go back to that work.
Yeah. I like the analogy of sort of our bodies being like a machine that breaks down. We do a lot of cycling, so we're in Cambridge, and I've got a bike that I probably get a service once every 6 months, and it really does need a service by the time it gets to 6 months. And I don't actually think that's enough. I have a friend who's really good. Every Saturday he services all their bikes. He's sort of putting oil on them, he's sorting them out. And then there's looking at my bike thinking, actually, if I'd just taken this and oiled it every week and just looked after it, it would not be in the state that it gets to in 6 months. And no amount of servicing at 6 months is going to get it back to the state that it would have been in if I had serviced it every single week. And I think that sometimes we think of rest as this thing that you can make up. So if I have a rest once every 6 months for 2 whole weeks, that'll be me done. That'll be me recharged. But actually, it doesn't really work like that. It's like sleep. You can't really repay your sleep debt by having a massive line at the weekend. If you're only getting 3 hours of sleep during the week, you've got to do it. You've got to do it regularly. Would you agree with that about rest? Yeah,
I mean, I think before you mentioned sleep, I was about to say it is the same for sleep. You can't. It's not something you can bank. And another example is your mobile phone. As soon as the battery starts to dip on that, we stop everything and run around to try and find a charger, because we couldn't possibly have our phone without battery. And yet, why are we different? Why do we go and go and go until we can't go anymore? And so you can charge your phone up to 100%, but it's only got a finite capacity that it will last for, and we are the same. Our brains need a rest. It's a physical body rest, but also the brain rest. And rest doesn't always mean doing nothing. It's changing what the brain's doing that will give it a rest from whatever it was working on, which is why the movement works. So it's just changing the physical things that the body's doing.
Yes, I was reading about the need for our brains to go from focus mode into diffuse mode, and I teach about that when I'm teaching about taking these 5-minute breaks. So I was preparing a talk today, and I was very focused, getting the slides, making sure I had it prepared. And then what they say is sort of every sort of half an hour, you need to just take a break, do something completely different. They suggest play Tetris or look out the window, go for a quick 2-minute walk, or do something that doesn't require focus, which helps your brain go into diffuse mode. And when your brain is in diffuse mode, you just become so much more creative, and you actually start to solve some of the problems that you were working on while you were working on that presentation or whatever. So it's really, really important. I think by not taking short breaks during our day, but then not resting, we deny ourselves the problem-solving ability, the ability to be more creative. So I think this thing about rest, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, so there's probably going to be lots of podcast episodes on rest, because all these books are coming to me, and I'm reading, I've realised it's quite an issue in my life. But I've sort of realised that, you've this thing about rest increasing productivity, it is a real thing. It's not just about well-being. It's not just about feeling happy and having a nice life.
Yeah. And it's funny because I am a bit of a magpie with things. So I see different things that I'm interested in, and I want to try that, and I want to try that, and I collect it all together. And I was starting to think last week, actually, I've signed up for too many things, and I'm thinking that they are kind of rests and breaks, but actually mostly it's absorption of knowledge. So I sort of had a bit of a clear out and thought, right, let's just settle on the key things that I want to do. And that had led to me thinking, so you were saying sometimes when we did go into that diffuse mode, that's when the sort of creativity comes. And my creativity comes when I go for a walk, or I jump on my bike. And I'd started to think, actually, I wonder whether I should actually plan that as a work activity, that I have to go and walk and I have to think and come up with these ideas. And the jury's kind of still out a little bit in terms of, if you're meant to be walking for a rest, then you shouldn't be forcing yourself to come up with ideas whilst you're walking. So I think there's something in just giving the brain the chance to relax while you're doing those things. And if a byproduct is creativity, brilliant. But I definitely mustn't force myself down that road. It's really, I say this quite a lot, there's no magic pill to well-being. There's your way. There's no right way. It's your way, and it's what fits into to your world and to your context. So I work with a lot of people, and they'll say, I just really, really don't like exercise, but I know all the research says that it's really good for me. And then when you drill down to, well, what actually is your definition of exercise? Oh, well, I should probably go to the gym for an hour 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. And then when we actually do a bit more exploration around, well, what would you actually enjoy that's just going to move your body? Then we get into things like, well, I really like walking along the beach. So, okay, we'll take a walk along the beach, because putting yourself in a situation that you really not enjoy is going to create as much pain in your brain that it's going to override the physical benefits of doing that exercise. So do something that's going to give your brain and your body something that it wants, and then that applies for everything. So what your definition of rest is, do what that is for you, not what someone else is kind of telling you to do. By all means, gather lots of ideas from different people, but the best idea is going to be coming from inside you, because you are the person that knows you best.
Yeah. And I love that concept that you brought up, Sheila, of looking at rest as part of your work. Now, I know what you don't want to do is become legalistic and feel forced to do it. But I was talking to someone recently who says that she every week badges in a couple of hours of thinking time where she sort of thinks things through. I said, oh, that sounds great. Where do you do it? Should I do it in the sauna? I was like, that sounds brilliant. Right. As soon as lockdown finishes, I'm joining a place with a sauna and a steam room. I love it. And you sort of completely chill out, but actually you start to do some deep work. And if we can badge that, for maybe some high achievers out there, if that's what it takes to get you resting, to badge it as helping your work, then that's really, really important. And I think a lot of people are slightly allergic to rest because they think it means just doing nothing and sitting around doing nothing. And what I've learned about myself recently, I hate sitting around doing nothing. I find it really, I love sitting around reading a book, but for me, that's not doing nothing. But I was listening to another great podcast, at Rangan Chatterjee's fantastic podcast with Alex Pang, who's written a lot of books about rest. That's a very dangerous podcast. I listen to it and I always buy the books. Yeah. I've got these millions of books waiting to be read, but
I don't think you're alone there.
Yeah, Alex Payne talks about this concept of deep play, which is part of rest. So really getting into a hobby or learning a skill or something that will help you rest, but actually you are active doing it. And he talks about it could be, painting, or it could be golf, or it could be, it doesn't have to be active, it could be creating things or playing music or something like that. And I took that seriously. So I literally just joined a tennis club and had a lesson yesterday, and I've absolutely loved it because genuinely when you're playing and trying to learn how to not whack the ball straight into the net, you're not focused on other stuff, but it's quite refreshing. It's an hour and you're outside. So I think this really thinking about not just having a hobby that's going to take you away from work, but having a hobby that will get you into that creative, relaxed zone. I guess it's getting you into flow, isn't it? And that's the flow is the place that we should all be aiming at, according to Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I think is the way you pronounce your name. And he was the chap that talks about flow, talks about the importance of flow and the fact that we all need to be in a state where time stands still, where we're really engrossed in our activities, and we're just in this amazing state. It's very good for us. Have you experienced flow?
Yeah, and I can't pronounce his name either. I just say, the guy whose name begins with M.
It's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I think his name is.
I did try to learn it once. Yes, so, and I think the most recent example was some friends bought me a pottery throwing experience. And I'd never done anything on the potter's wheel before. Right. And the thing that really stood out from me was that she said, you have to get yourself in a position where your elbows are on your thighs so that you can feel the clay through your body. Now, I'm really up here person. Everything goes on up here. And I find it really difficult to read messages and signals from my body. So I'm doing a lot. But that really stood out for me because I had to come out of my head and really feel what was going on with that clay. And I really did get into that state of flow. And it's happened because when you finish doing whatever it is, you stand and you go, oh, what just happened? Because it feels like you've just gone into this bubble. And funny enough, talking about hobbies, I was listening to a podcast this morning. This is a good one. Michael Bungay-Stani, I think I've mentioned to you. So it's called We Will Get Through This. And it's specifically around how we'll get through the current pandemic. And he was talking to a chap, I will have to follow up with the name because it was Neil somebody. He was talking about taking up a weird hobby that was really, really different. And he had a couple that he took. One was, I think, glass blowing, but the other was learn to do balloon animals at children's parties. And I thought, that is definitely weird, and that's going to take you into a different zone of your brain, particularly if you are normally operating on patients or normally dishing out medication, and then at the weekend you're blowing up balloons. I thought that was quite a cool way to get really get you real change for your mind.
Gosh, pottery, balloons, pottery. I tried a pottery course last year, and I must say I really loved it. But it just was at the wrong time and it took up too much of my time. So it actually made me quite stressed that I was losing 2 hours out of my day when I needed to be doing other things. So there's this balance about knowing we've got to carve out time for this, but actually doing it at a time that suits you, that you know you're going to rest. And I think this goes back to what times of the day are you at your best? And actually this is just coming to me why this pottery class didn't suit, because I was doing it in the morning. And actually, for me, the first couple of hours in the morning are really valuable time when I'm at my most productive and creative. That's where I need to be sitting down, creating content, writing content, doing all the products and creating the teaching and all of that. Actually, I'd have been better probably doing pottery in the evening when I'm probably just going to be sat in front of the telly or not doing anything where I need really deep concentration. So I think taking control over when and where you do these hobbies and you do your rest and scheduling it in. I hate to say this whole thing about scheduling because I'm a Myers-Briggs P. I hate schedules and things like that. But unless you do, it just never happens.
Yeah, and the thing about the scheduling is the brain absolutely loves it. It just loves a bit of routine because it knows what to do and it knows what's going to happen. So it just gets straight on with it. So if there's something that you find difficult to do, get into a routine, and then the brain doesn't mind doing it. So you've actually kind of tricked it almost whilst it wasn't watching. Talk about the chimp paradox, and it's the chimp in there going, I don't want to do this. But actually, once the chimp knows what he's got to do and he's managed and he's given his instructions, he's like, right, okay, I know what to do now. That's what I'll do.
Yeah. Bit like kids and music lessons. I don't want to do it. By practice, well, you're doing it. There's no choice. All right, okay, I just better get on with it. Whereas you suddenly sprung something on them, they'd be like, no way, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, we could go off a complete tangent, but I'm reading Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel at the moment.
Okay.
And he's talking about really understanding our feelings and getting that layer beneath. And so it was just you saying about the children saying, I don't want to. He talks about understanding, okay, so what is it that that is making you not want to do that, so that you get to the next layer? And it could be anything from, well, actually I wanted to watch TV, or I wanted some attention. Actually, I don't want to go off and do that thing on my own. I want to talk about something bad that's happened. So getting underneath what is it that where's that feeling coming from about not wanting to do something, and that can tell you some answers about if you're thinking about not wanting to rest, or what is it you're wanting to do instead, and what is it you think you're going to gain from not taking the rest, and just going that next layer down.
That's interesting, because feelings show what your underlying needs are, don't they? I think definitely when I felt like I can't just do nothing, I can't sit and read a book, probably underlying need was I need to be getting on with some work because I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by what I've got to do. And so that tells you something about your work if you find it really hard to rest. But I think there's another thing about rest in that, using the car analogy now, we're often going at 100 miles an hour and then we expect just to rest. That's it, right, I'm resting now.
Yeah.
Just takes a while to slow down. And my dad's a GP, and we used to go on holiday, and he used to sort of save up all his holiday, and we used to go away for 3 weeks in the summer in a caravan to the middle of Wales in a field where there was no one else. And he just, I think for the first week, he'd just sleep. He was absolutely knackered, and after about 8, 9, 10 days he'd sort of start to merge and I think that is a very common thing I hear, that people don't start to enjoy their sort of longer breaks if they've been going 100 miles an hour till about 6, 7, 8 days in, because it's just really hard to switch off and turn the adrenaline down.
Yeah, because it's almost like, so you're driving along the motorway at 100 miles an hour and then you almost do an emergency stop and a handbrake turn. And if you're sat in the middle of a motorway having done an emergency stop and a handbrake turn, you are going to be a bit dazed.
That is slightly stressful.
And so and it's going to take you a while to sort of forget all of the events that led up to the emergency stop, and get rid of all the things that you were kind of driving so fast that those things are now kind of you've just suddenly stopped, and all the other cars that you just went past are now whizzing past you, and they're all the thoughts that are still going because you still got all that work stuff in your mind. Interesting.
Yeah. So Sheela, well, the reason I wanted you on the podcast was to talk about all of this, but because we've got summer coming up, she said, looking out the window as it's raining, it's the middle of July, and this summer's not going to be quite the same as other summers, and we're still trying to decide whether we should go on the summer holiday we've booked or not. And we just thought it would be really good, first of all, to think about rest. I think rest is really important. I think that in lockdown, people have got very funny attitudes to rest, actually, because many people are at home anyway. They're feeling, well, why do I need to have some time off or rest because I've just been at home? But the reality is they've been working really hard, even if they've been at home, because it's not normal. They might be homeschooling the children or just being on Zoom calls the whole time with things. And even if they are frontline workers, they may have had to be doing consulting, maybe from home, quite a lot of people as well. And so it's just all a bit weird. So work has been weird and different. And so people think, well, should I be taking time off? Shouldn't I? You might feel a bit guilty about doing it. Plus, when we take time off, what can we actually do? What is going to revive and refresh us? Because a lot of us rely on sort of going somewhere lovely, hot and sunny and being able to spend 2 weeks flat on our backs next to a pool perhaps, or walking or whatever. We might not have those options this year. So I know that what I've done is sort of have reached out to a lot of my coaching colleagues, my sort of wellbeing friends, and said, what are your top 5 tips for summer holiday rest? So Sheela, what were some of your top 5 tips for surviving the summer and actually properly resting?
Yeah, so the first one I'd got was to definitely take some time out. We've been talking for this whole session about rest. It's really important. I think one of the things I was thinking about is if you've been working from home, to actually make sure you went out to clear the physical space. So put everything away to do with work. So you're going to take a week off, but you're just going to stay at home. Make sure everything is put away and it's out of sight, and you've kind of reclaimed that space, because that physical space will tell the brain, right, okay, we're not thinking about work now. And simple things like making sure you set a voicemail to say, I'm not at work, actually. This is the person to contact if you need somebody, to make sure that you're not going to be sort of taken back into the work mode. Out of office, just a quick, simple email to tell people that you're not there either. Maybe there's a few people you need to tell in advance so that you can just make sure that people know that you're not to be contacted. And I think that people are recognising the need for time out. And so it's likely that if you tell someone you do that, they will listen, because they'll want to make sure that the same happens for them when their time comes around. So I think the time out is really important, as we've been talking about the rest, but as this is sort of an extended period of rest. And something that's just come to me actually when we were talking about those sort of short rest breaks, there's an app called Insight Timer, which has got short meditations and mindful talks. It's completely free. There is an upgrade, but I don't honestly think you need it. And you can do anything on there from a minute to 3 hours. So I think it's a useful resource for rest and recharge. So that was my first tip, time out.
Right. Yep.
The second one was to go tourist. So even if you're staying at home, go be a tourist in your own town. Look at it from fresh eyes. So one of the most resilient things that we can do is see things from a different perspective. So if I'm speaking to people who are actually still at work, I'll say, when you go home tonight, drive a different way or walk a different way, because you have to focus on different things. So you see different things, and then that helps your brain switch off from what it's been doing in the day. And because it's seeing those different things, it sees different opportunities and possibilities. And so I think to do something touristy in your own area, and then not have that whole long journey to get home again because you're already home, it will make quite a difference. And you can do it on a day-to-day basis, and if you're having a full week out as a break. So that's my second tip. The third tip was catch some rays. Now, today is not looking too spectacular. I put on my favourite summer shirt anyway, because I thought I'll try and bring some sunshine. So catch some rays. we are in the period of time where we've got the longest days. So it's light at 5 a.m. and it's still light at 10 p.m. So do something like get up really early one day and go and see the sunrise somewhere. Check the weather first to make sure you've got half a chance. Or do something, stay out late one night. Last week, so I live down in Poole in Dorset, and last Monday, I think we left the house at like 4 or 5 o'clock, drove over to Charmouth, and did a good old hike up over where church was built. And then we took a picnic tea and just, stayed out right until the last drop of sunlight. So, and also getting out and getting into the sunshine helps us sleep, because we need the vitamin D. And I think one of the top 5 things you can do for your sleep is get some sunlight on your face first thing in the morning. And if you're out later, then it's tying in with the circadian rhythm. So you're out and you're out and you're experiencing the dusk. So your body naturally starts to get ready for sleeping.
Yeah, and there is something about being outdoors, isn't there? It's just so good for your soul. And yeah, the other night I was getting really irritated with the family. We'd just been together for far too long, and we got back about sort of 7:30, 8ish, and just me and my husband said, right, just let's go for an evening bike ride. We've not done that for ages. It was it was lovely, and when we got back, we felt so got back about 9:30. It was still plenty of light. Actually, we sort of get into the habit, don't we? I think in the UK of staying in the evenings. Actually,
this is it. Yeah, we and it is make the most of that daylight, because we tend to think, 8:30 is the end of the day, but actually there's still another hour and a half of daylight that we can get hold of. And so if you're taking time out as a break, great, because you can have really, really long days out. But if you are, even when you're still working through the summer, you can still plan to do things in the evening, and it just makes the day feel like you've just got so much more out of it, and you become so much more grateful for it.
So that's number 3. Number 4?
Number 4 was to have a plan B, which kind of leads on from the catch the rays, because we don't always know that we're going to be able to catch the rays. So even if your plan B is just to pack a waterproof so that you can still enjoy the time out. I usually find that if I pack a waterproof, that tends to stop the rain. If I put sun cream on, it'll stop the sun. If I put a waterproof in my bag, that'll tend to stop the the rain. And the best example I heard of a plan B was someone I was doing some work with last year. Now, as you know, I do some ultra distance running and triathlon Ironman. But the adventure that he'd been on was mountain biking from Mexico to Canada. Wow. And it's something like 1,900 miles. And he had to do a lot of preparation to do that, obviously. But one of the contingencies he had to plan for was that he would be cycling through forests where he might get attacked by a bear. And he obviously hadn't come across this before. And so he did his research and found out that actually people that carry guns are something like 90% more likely to die if they come into a bear attack. People who carry bear spray are something like 80% more likely to survive. So, but he wouldn't have known that if he hadn't done his research and done his planning. So the first job on his list when he arrived over in the States, because I don't think they sell it here, strangely, was to buy some bear spray, so that he had that bear spray in his pack as his contingency. And the other one that I thought was quite amusing was that when you go to sleep at night, always put your bike down facing the direction of travel that you need to go in the morning. Because when you wake up in the morning, you're so sleepy that if your bike's facing the wrong way, you may end up going backwards on yourself.
That would be a bummer. I think that's quite good. Yes. I'm sure there's a life lesson for us somewhere. Always put your bike.
So it's like, what's your bear spray? What is that thing that you need in the back pocket?
Yeah. But I do remember reading something about the whole power of plan B, and that being, that you're not going to, if you've got one plan and that doesn't work, you've got another option. You're then not quite so disappointed when the first one doesn't work out, because it's like, fine, I've planned for this, rather than, everything's gone wrong, everything's bad. So I think that's a really good idea. So have a plan B.
And it's about
maybe it's just getting a load of films that you can say, right, if it's rainy, we're just going to sit and watch through all the Marvel movies or something better.
My neighbours did that actually. They went through Marvel. They had the chronological order, and they were working their way through them. But so the plan B is like it's the spare wheel in the car as well, and it's what it comes down to is our sense of control. So it's I know we talk about it in your Shapes course, the zone of power. So what have I got control over here? So if you've got a plan B, you feel like, well, if that doesn't work out, what I know I can do is this, and that's what makes people feel better about themselves, because autonomy and control is a real key thing to helping us with our well-being.
Great.
Yeah.
And your final tip.
My final tip is to go funny. So I talked about the mwahaha earlier. But there's so much research that shows that when we have a good laugh, real good proper belly laugh, we are more relaxed. We then get into a more positive frame of mind, and having a positive frame of mind and being able to see that we will be able to get through situations, that optimistic view. So it's not about going around like grinning like a Cheshire cat all the time. It's about just believing that things will eventually be okay, and being in a positive frame of mind helps our creativity, it helps us learn. And so you might have come across Martin Seligman. So he's professor in positive psychology. There's some epic resources on a lot of his websites. I'll get you the link so you can put them in the show notes. He did a webinar last week about positivity during the pandemic, and there's just so much research that shows the benefits of it. And so if you're looking for a funny film, there's on Netflix, you've got the Eurovision film, which is quite entertaining. And then my other favourite from the current season is Andrew Cotter, YouTube. So he is a Scottish sports commentator, but of course through the pandemic there was no sports, or there were no sports to commentate on. So he decided to start commentating on his dogs, Olive and Mabel. Yes. And it is priceless, and I don't think even he realised how much of a sensation it was going to be. But if you read through some of the comments on some of his posts, people are saying, I literally lived for this through the pandemic. So I think go funny is a real that's a real key thing for me. And I think I know I'm only allowed 5, but I'll just sneak an extra one in the end, which is we are wired to connect with other people. So anything you do with other people and connect yourself socially is definitely going to bring you some benefits. And essentially our brain treats the need for social connection in the same way that it does food and water. So if it thinks it's going to be treated unfairly in a social way, in a social setting, then it'll start behaving like it thinks it's not going to get food and water and start shutting down. So that's a bit excessive, but that is essentially, that's the core of it. So if you can connect with people, then that's going to do you well.
Yeah, I think connection is so important in so many ways. If you're having a down day, just get on the phone to a friend or go for a walk with a friend or something. Really important.
Everything's so much better when you've just had a good old chinwag.
Yeah. Actually, laughter as well. You talk about go funny, but everything's a lot funnier when you're with friends as well, isn't it? Or family watching something. So yeah.
And I think there was another podcast, the Happiness Lab, which I think we've talked about before. There's one on gripes, and it really made me chuckle because they were talking about different gripes that people have, and like from big to small. And they talked about one someone had got a gripe about stickers on fruit, and it just made me chuckle because when you say it out loud, it's like, how important and significant is that in this current sort of environment? And so sometimes it helps to look at things from that funny perspective, because you see that actually, you know what, it's just not that important. It's that phrase like, is this really going to matter in 3 months' time? Can I try and laugh about it now? And I think if you're having
problems laughing about stuff, and I think many of us have lost our sense of humour. Even just practicing gratitude, and one top tip that we talk about a lot in the Shapes course is just writing 3 things down every night that you're grateful for, and that will start to rewire your brain, and you'll start to look out during the day for things that you're grateful for. And there is so much to be grateful for, there really is, even in times of difficulty and trauma, and when things look really bleak. There are all sorts of gifts hiding around the corner.
Yeah, and the grateful thing, it doesn't have to be big stuff. It can be things like, I went to go to use the bathroom, and there was a new toilet roll there because someone else had changed it.
Is that scraping the barrel a bit, Sheela?
No,
not for you. That's one of your gripes, is it, in your house? No, I
think it was just, the toilet roll in the pandemic, and that there was a toilet roll in the house, and it was changed by someone else, not by me.
There's all sorts of things to be grateful in that. I see what you mean.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, well, Sheela, thank you. That was really helpful. These sort of, actually 6 top tips for the summer, and then talking a little bit more about rest and the importance of rest and resetting, and just being able to be ourselves better if we rest. And we, just to reiterate to anyone out there that's thinking that they're just going to plow on all summer and not take any time out. Even if you can just take half a day, you really, really need to. So just encourage you, book that in your diary now. Book it in, block it off, and do your best to do it. And then plan what you're going to do with it as well, because I think things do take a little bit more planning at the moment, don't they? So Sheela, if people wanted to get hold of you, how can they reach you?
Yes, so I'm on Twitter at wellbeing_champ. I'm on LinkedIn. And my website is bluegreencoaching.com.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. We'll get you back another time to talk a little bit more in depth about some of that, and maybe another one about rest, because I think there's more. I've still got to read that book, or the 2 books that I ordered. So
it feels like it's going to be 101 tips for rest.
I think it might be a year of how to slow down and eliminate hurry from our lives. I think really important. So brilliant. Great. Thank you, Sheela. Have a good rest of the week and have a good summer.
Thank you, and you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please subscribe to my You Are Not a Frog email list and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have enjoyed it, then please leave me a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. So keep well, everyone. You're doing a great job. You got this.